Welcome, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you connect from. My name is Sebastián Abadjara, and I work with AIDA. I'm pleased to moderate today's third and final session of the webinar series on transformative global experiences in water governance. Please don't forget to tell us where you're tuning on from in the chat. We're going to have, before we start, we're going to have simultaneous interpretation to Spanish, English, Portuguese, and French. Suppose you're connected from a computer, you can you put the slide up of the interpretation, please? Suppose you connect from a computer. Once the interpretation is activated, in that case, you must click on the interpretation icon, which is a glove on the lower menu of your screen. And then you can select your language. You must also click mute original audio to listen only to the interpreter's audio. If you connect from a mobile device, it's also fine. You must download the Zoom app, enter the event, and then click on where it says more. Then select the language you want to listen and mute the original audio. Having said that, and remembering that we have simultaneous interpretation and that we will be very eager to know where are you tuning from, if you can put your name and your organization and also the country you're connecting from, it will be great. Now, for those who just connect, my name is Sebastián Abadjara, and I work with AIDA in the Ecosystems program. AIDA is a regional non-profit, non-governmental organization with more than 25 years of experience in environmental law. AIDA comprises lawyers, scientists, and other professionals based in and on working throughout Latin America. Our mission is to empower individuals and communities to secure their rights to a healthy environment at the national and an international level, developing, implementing, and enforcing environmental standards. Together, today, with both ends, and on behalf of the co-author organizations of the Transformative Water Pact, we welcome you to the third and final session of this series of webinars about the Transformative Water Pact. A brief description of what these series of events have been through. The TWP, as the abbreviation says, is an instrument developed by a diverse group of over 40 environmental justice advocates from the global south, civil society, and academic circles. And it was prepared for the United Nations Water Conference in 2023. The proposed vision of this instrument is to have a comprehensive approach that addresses the current water crisis caused by unsustainable human activities. It promotes governance and justice models that sustain life on Earth by flourishing water and ecosystems and recognizing the diversity of social, cultural, and natural values. In this series of webinars, we have sought to facilitate a dialogue among the TWP co-authors and their allies, focusing on global South countries' water governance and justice challenges. The goal has been to highlight the impact of sharing valuable global experiences in advocacy, litigation, local solutions, campaigning, and research that have contributed to advance for a protection of the right to water worldwide. This final session will explore how community organization, capacity building, and progressive policies have improved sustainable water conservation in Kenya, focusing on transparent, inclusive governance at the basin level and the role of community networks in managing shared water resources. A special attention will be given to the challenges of water privatization and the involvement of foreign entities with local governments, aiming to build a shared understanding of water as a common good and foster solutions for equitable access. Today, we will be joined by three wonderful people that have been essential for the organization of this webinar. First and foremost, Violet Matiru, who is the Executive Director of Millennium Community Development Initiatives, MCDI. We'll also have Halenishi Yusuf, who is a PhD candidate in the Newcastle University in the UK and former Managing Director of the Makwene County Sand Conservation and Utilization Authority. And last but not least, George Gitwanja Gachier, founder of Community Action for Nature in Gitunguru. Each presentation will last 12 minutes. Following the presentations, there will be an open discussion that is going to last between 10 and 15 minutes, where questions submitted by the audience through the Q&A section on the chat on the lower section of the screen will be addressed. Finally, Aida will wrap it up with some concluding remarks for 5 minutes. Having said that, let's start with our first speaker, Violet Matiru. Let me say a few words about Violet. She's an independent consultant in natural resources management, monitoring and evaluation of and gender mainstreaming. She co-founded the MCDI, the Millennium Community Development Initiatives, in 2005, which implements community programs. Since 2013, MCDI has facilitated the Athi River Community Network along the Athi River, Kenya's second longest river. This network collaborates through Water Resources Users Association, Community Forest Association, and farmer groups to create local solutions for environmental and livelihood challenges. Violet will give an overview of citizen action for water conservation and equitable governance through the Athi River Community Network. Before I yield the floor to Violet, please remember that our event offers simultaneous translation to English, Spanish, Portuguese, and French. If you are accessing from the computer, you can activate in the globe in the lower menu, or from a cell phone if you click in the word more, then choose your language and mute the original audio. Additionally, we would love to hear your questions, so please feel free to submit them through the Q&A questions on the Zoom or in the chat. If you can let us know to whom the question is directed, it would be great. Thanks in advance for being part of the discussion and for joining to this webinar. Violet, the floor is yours. Thank you very much again.
Okay, thank you very much, Sebastian. And thank you for the introduction. Just to be very clear, the Millennium Community Development Initiatives, we are a community-based organization. So just a bit of a context. This is the context of we operate in Kenya. As you can see from the map, Kenya is a sort of medium-sized country. And I've put a comparison with the Netherlands just to see that, yeah, the Netherlands is much smaller, but we are medium-sized country with about a population of 50-something million. The censuses are usually a bit political, so we are never quite sure, but we have definitely more than 40 million people. But of relevance to this webinar is the fact that 80% of Kenya is classified as being arid and semi-arid. So water is very precious. Today we are going to discuss two rivers. The Tana River, which is the longest river in Kenya, and it starts from the Mount Kenya region, then it flows to the Indian Ocean. Then we're also going to discuss the second river, which is the Athi River, which is the second longest river. And this river passes through Nairobi. Now, the city of Nairobi has a devastating effect on both these two rivers because 95% of the water used in the city is brought through interbasin transfer from the Tana River. Then we in the city use that water, pollute it, and dump it in the Athi River. So the Nairobi city affects two watersheds. So just a brief historical context. Traditionally, communities in Kenya and in many parts of the world, the management of natural resources was very much linked to our spirituality. There was also our physical and mental well-being. So there were animal totems. People had specific resources reserved for men, women, and children. Like in my culture, which is the Kikuyu, in Kenya, we have certain rivers that actually are called Roaka, women's rivers. That's where the women would do their ceremonies. Then there were also some rivers for boys. It's called Mai Aihe. Up to today, there are areas which are known because There were ceremonies which would be conducted in the forest, in the sea, the lakes, the rivers. But when the colonizers and the missionaries came, they declared these practices as primitive and satanic. They used words like animist, pagan, backward. They referred to these practices as part of darkness. So communities today, we are caught up between the traditional management systems where parts of rudiments of them, traditional management systems remain, and these introduce systems, and there is that tension. Another problem is that the colonial and the post-colonial policies encourage extractivism, a lot of use of resources without considering that you need to reserve some for the future generations, and also classism, where the settlers were given first priority, then the natives second priorities. And those policies still continue to haunt us up till today. So there is also tension between central natural resource management systems and community-led management systems. And in the past, they used to tell us that the government would provide water for all by the year 2000. When we were growing up, that was a mantra. But the year 2000 came and they discovered that the government alone could not do this. There is also another issue, which is externally driven policy agendas that affect our policies, where external governments, Western governments, governments from even the Asia region come and inject their agendas into our policy review processes, especially to promote private sector interests like export and all that. So those affect the policy environment within our countries. The Water Act of 2002, which was later amended in 2016 and again in 2023, sought to address existing tensions by creating water resource users associations and also balancing water resource management versus service provision. So the water resource users associations, the whole country has been mapped in what are called subcatchments, where these RUAs, Water Resource Users Association, we refer to them as RUAs. So these RUAs are supposed to co-manage these subcatchments with the government agencies. But unfortunately, only like 50% of them are formed to date. And most of these RUAs are institutionally weak because they're supposed to rely on just volunteer. There is no government allocation of a budget to support them as institutions, to support them to do catchment protection, to support them to address water conflicts between different uses. Then also we have 5 basins in Kenya, 5 major basins. You can see that's a map of the 5 major basins. Because of tensions between the national government and the 47 county governments, these basin committees have not yet been formed, much as they were part of the Water Act of 2002. Now, we decided, given the fact that there's been these policies, we decided to start taking advantage of the policies and start seeing how we can bring communities together. And we started this when we co-founded MCDI in 2005, and also when we were allocating small grants from the Global Green Grants Fund, which I did for up to 2019, not 2016, for 16 years. So, and it was so important to see the role of small grants that go directly to community groups. Small grants really encourage community groups which are looking after different sections of the river. So in 2013, we decided to focus on the Athi River because that's where we live. And in 2020, both ends, we entered into a partnership with them to promote agroecology and inclusive water governance. And in 2023, both ends linked us to IHE Delft to assist us with remote sensing research, and we, the communities, bring in citizen science. So The Athi River Community Network, we are made up of the Ruas and the Community Forestry Association, organic farmers, and community-based organization within the basin. And our main aim of coming together is for solidarity. So we do joint advocacy, we do action, research, and we are now friends. We are family. We visit each other, and you'll see at the end, there are some photographs where we can see when we visit each other, upstream communities visit the coastal communities and such. So we've become a family, and Halinishi and George, who will be presenting, are part of this family, which we would like to grow with anybody who lives in the basin and also anybody who'd like to support our community work. That is our very organic map, which we are hoping that now we are working with IHE Delft. They can help us map out those sub-catchments in a much more accurate way. But we love this map because we put our signature on it. Every time we meet, we add new members and partners within the Athi River. So just briefly, upstream, people abstract water. This water that you see in this tank, we constructed a water project for the community from a forest which is upstream called Thogoto Forest. We also support the organic farmers because farmers are using very dangerous chemicals which they're putting directly into the rivers, which are then affecting not just the communities, but also the biodiversity. You can see these are some of the springs that have been tapped into this water project. This is a very important water source. It is called the Roiro Dam, and that will be the subject of George's presentation, the inequities around this dam. Yeah. So we also use documentation as an advocacy tool. One community's water project had been grabbed by a more powerful water company, which was linked to the county government of Kiambu. And the community, following several community meetings, was able to take back their water project. So we as MCDI and the Athi River Community Network documented their story as a way to give them more strength and also as an advocacy tool so that the current intimidation that they are undergoing is reduced because this story now is being shared at the international level. So the link is there. Please share this story because it is a form of advocacy. We also use research for advocacy. Good quality data is so important for the community at the community level for advocacy. We have a wetland, again, in the sort of upstream, not complete upstream, but sort of before the city, that is being over-abstracted. There are so many boreholes, wells, people pumping water. So on Saturday, this coming Saturday, we are going to present the data of the abstraction points, which we mapped using GIS round the wetland, which is about almost 4-kilometer perimeter, showing that come, let us reason together. If we over-abstract water from our wetland, what will happen to us? This is originally also my home area. We have family land. Actually, I used to farm when I was a small girl. We used to farm right next to this wetland. So I'm part and parcel of this community. Then in the city, we really pollute our rivers. You can see that is effluent from housing estates. And we have these communities trying to plant bamboo. One of the Water Resource Users Association, those are the members, young people. So we also work a lot with young people so that they also get a sense of caring. This community has created a riparian park where you can see during the weekends, community members come and sit there because many of them will live in apartment blocks. And during the last year's floods, this bamboo that the community has planted saved 4 people who could have drowned, but they were trapped in the bamboo and they were able to be rescued. Also, this little kitten was saved by the bamboo, and it is now called Keguo, which means floods, and the community look after it. This is what Halinishi will be presenting. So this is in the middle section. And then downstream, we have the community at the coast. They host the communities from upstream. We lost a lady who was very active, Arafa Salim Baya, she passed away because of COVID complications, but she did a lot of work restoring the mangroves and also assisting the community to generate revenue from ecotourism. So we'd say, rest in peace, Arafa, we continue with your work. So these are just photographs where you can see communities from upstream visiting each other. You can see that is a person with visual disability, but he's a chairman of the youth group that protects this forest, which is the Thogoto forest. So you can see we work together with the children to plant trees. That is our friend Melvin. He visits us. That's us eating some fruits in the catchment. So these are just photographs. You can see Halinishi presenting at the community level. We had also visitors from India who came and shared with us approaches to negotiating as communities. And we learned a lot from Professor Vijay about negotiating as communities with powerful entities. So we learned a lot from him and we apply his lessons. We use a rope to say that upstream, downstream, we are all connected. We use this at the community-based adaptation workshop in Arusha to demonstrate that upstream and downstream, we are all connected. That is us with our map. You can see how we love our map. And that's us when we meet together, we eat, we have a meal, we laugh together. So the principles are here, and I think those we will use those for discussion. So thank you very much, and I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Violet. It was a very comprehensive presentation. I'll just to remain with this phrase that you said at the end. We are all connected, because that's the way we must approach to rivers. And that's one of the purposes of the Transformative Water Pact, to understand and recognize the present inequities in water governance. Those inequities have a root in historical systems, and the historical context that you have explained to us help us understand how these inequities are causing an impact right now in communities to fulfill and to enjoy the right to water. Thank you very much, Violet. We invite everybody to submit your questions through the Q&A section in the Zoom chat. If possible, telling us to whom the question is directed to. Our second speaker today is Halinishi Yusuf. Halinishi is studying sustainable and mining rates and freshwater availability in seasonal river systems in arid and semi-arid lands, focusing on her home county of Makueni. She is a founding member of the Ati River Community Network, ARCN, which Violet referred in her presentation, and the former managing director of the Makueni Sand Conservation and Utilization Authority. Halinishi led efforts to regulate sand harvesting and develop policies for rehabilitating rivers affected by excessive mining, including construction sand dams to improve water access for irrigation, livestock, and domestic use. Thank you very much, Halinishi. Her presentation will discuss citizen involvement in regulating sand harvesting and rehabilitation seasonal rivers in Makueni County in the Ati River Basin. Thank you very much, Halinishi. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the very lengthy and glorious first introduction. And my first is to say a big thank you for the organizers of this webinar and for the opportunity to share, of course, our experiences as the Ati River Network, but also specifically the work that we're doing in the different parts of the basin. And I hope next time I'll have a better chance to talk about the sand mining aspects if another webinar is organized. But today I'll try to link the sand mining aspects with the water conservation and also community involvement in governance, and also in charting their way in terms of developing their water and also managing their water sources. Yeah, and just as Violet did a good, presentation on the context in terms of Kenya, I want to build a bit of context in terms of the Athi River Basin, but specifically take you to the mid-Athi River section, which is more arid and semi-arid than the upper section, which covers Kiambu and Nairobi, where Athi River starts to provide water to the Kenyan, Kenyan citizens. And I'll be focusing a lot on Machakos County and Kajiado and Makueni, which is basically the green section of the Athi River Basin. And personally, I come from Makueni County, which is where born and bred, and also had a chance to work for 5 years, working with the county government, which is since 2014, Kenya has the devolved governance system, and so we have 47 sub-regions with semi-autonomous governments. I mean, decentralized governments. And I had a chance to work with the county government of Makueni as the one in charge of sand mining issues, and also, of course, the intersection between sand rivers, sand mining, and water availability. And why this is important is, first of all, this area is very semi-arid. And in terms of the per capita water, availability, we are falling short of the global standards by almost halfway. That section of the mid-Athi River is doing about 400 cubic meters per person against the global standards of 1,000 cubic meters. So that's to tell you that this is a very water scarce area. But something important is that most of the rivers are seasonal rivers, with only Athi River, which is the perennial river. But the three counties are traversed by numerous seasonal rivers that are filled with sand, and it's important as an alluvial aquifer. Alluvial basically means this is full of sediment, sand, which play a very key role in recharge, retention, and availing water to the local community. And when you look at the future outlook, we're looking at, of course, we're facing climate change impacts. And so this area is going to continue suffering from the brunt of climate change effects. So we're already experiencing prolonged droughts, and this is punctuated with frequent floods. Of course, we're already experiencing very erratic rainfall, which is very unpredictable. But also when the rains finally, appear, they're very intense, causing a lot of flooding and a lot of erosion. So a lot of times these rains are not useful in terms of recharge, and also not very useful in terms of supporting agricultural production. And in terms of the water demand against the available water resources, we're already falling short of reaching the water demand by 65. We were at 65% in 2010, according to a report done by JICA, the Japanese International Corporation. And the projection is not even looking better, of course, because of climate change and of course, population growth, increased demand for water. And we're looking at a 91% deficit as we approach 2030. So the water issue is definitely going to be a very contested arena as we go forward, and even worse, especially in these dry areas. Now, focusing a bit more on Makueni County. Makueni County is about 8,000 square kilometers, with a population of about almost 1 million people. And almost 90% of this county is rural. So according to the classification of, urban, peri-urban, and rural, setups, then Makueni County is largely rural. And this already tells you that in terms of water provision, then the local community mostly rely on water from unimproved water sources. So these are rivers, these are boreholes, these are water pans, these are, water that is drawn, supplied by local vendors, but the original source is definitely an unimproved, water source. And just for context building, these pictures here, pictures that I've personally taken in different parts of the county. This is a very common, the picture on the left is a very common, site when you go along the rivers in Makueni, where you find the local communities just digging up what you call scoop holes and the excess water that is stored within sand. And in a bit more improved, sources, in the sense of, there's a bit of infrastructure, then you have the second picture where we have a shallow well with a pumping mechanism. So it could have a submersive water pump. At times it's solar powered, but in this case here, this is manual, where you just pump it with you use your muscles to pump the water from the shallow well. So this is what serves a lot of the communities in that area. The third picture is, of course, also a water well within a river, a dry river bed. And you can actually see that there's a tractor, a water bowser that is, being filled up with water. And this is supplied to different, premises, hotels, to, schools, institutions, to homes. And this is the typical picture when you go across the mid-section of the Athi River. And of course, some of the biggest challenges we continue to face, not only in Makueni, but also the other counties that I mentioned, is that, one, we are already living in a water scarce county, because mostly the sources are seasonal. Most of the water that we rely on is dependent on a recharge from rainfall. And then, of course, that ties to the second point, which is we're already experiencing erratic rains because of climate change and climate variability. But then, even in that context, we're also facing a lot of degradation of water sources and water catchment areas. We have uncontrolled, logging of trees in the hills, where, of course, most of the rivers originate from. For a long time, Makueni County had a huge problem of river sand mining, which has been put under control in the last, say, about 10 years. But the neighboring counties continue with this practice of, mining sand from the riverbeds, supply to the construction industry within and without the counties, so supplying Nairobi and environs. And this wholesomely affect the water catchment areas and continue then to make the water availability even more challenging. As mentioned by Violet, and I don't want to dwell on this, is that, of course, the water quality is very poor, of course, because of the pollution that's happening upstream, but also there's growing small-scale irrigation, especially like in Makueni, because of the sand conservation agenda that has availed a bit more water than the past. And so there's also a lot of use of fertilizers and chemicals that find their way into the water. And this lowers the water quality. General decline of water levels for obvious reasons. And one major issue is that the existing water sources within the county is that they are mostly community water schemes. So the boreholes, the shallow wells, the sand dams that I'll talk about a bit later, they're mostly developed and managed by the community. And so in most times they have challenges of operating without application of appropriate technology. So there's a lot of losses in water. There's also a lot of the water is not metered. They're also not using for example, using solar to pump their water. So it's limited in terms of what they're able to achieve. But one of the things that also really has bridled this community water schemes is the poor governance. Being community led institutions, then they have been highly affected by poor leadership, lack of, corruption within the community organizations. And a lot of times this impacts on the water scheme, and some of them actually end up just completely dying. There's also limited or lack of community participation in some of these projects, especially where the leadership is not keen to involve the larger community in terms of decision making. So it becomes sort of privatized without necessarily being, officially privatized, but it becomes, it ends up in the hands of a few people who manage it as their own private, private premises. And overall, what this means is that first, because of the combination of all these issues, is that the daily water production for the county is then way below what is demanded by the residents of the county and the different water users within the county. Of course, with little water and also poor water quality, that means also there's a poor sanitation and hygiene. Just to throw in some statistics, according to the World Bank report, Makueni County alone in 2014 used 683 million Kenya shillings. That's a lot of money in just managing, actually treating waterborne diseases, which could have easily been handled by promoting the water management section of the development agenda to ensure that there's adequate and clean water. So that has a huge economic bearing on the government, but also a huge economic health bearing to the people residing in these areas. Of course, that also means that there's limited, agricultural production because there's not enough water to do irrigation. And with the poor governance, lack of appropriate technology, lack of adequate participation of the community in decision making, that only means that the sustainability of the community water schemes then is highly affected. And as I mentioned, some of them eventually just die and get into this vicious cycle of lack of water and poor governance. However, it's not all, bad. We have a big resource, as I mentioned, within these three counties, the sand rivers. The many seasonal rivers have a lot of sand in them, very good quality sand, which of course for a long time has been coveted for construction. And so Makueni, Kajiado, Machakos, these counties within the mid-Athi River section, historically, dating back in the 50s, have been supplying sand to Nairobi, the capital city, and the peri-urban centers around Nairobi. But also now with the advent of the county governments, of course, there's a lot of development that is happening now with the devolution of governance. So these rivers then provide a source of construction materials, sand, for the construction industry. However, these rivers also are a main source of water to a lot of members of the community. In one of in the county abstract, Makueni County abstract, this may not be very clear, but the percentage that is served by rivers and streams is a whole 29% of the population. It's actually the highest in terms of provision of water, source of water, across all the about 10 or 15 sources of water. So that is to tell you that it's very important, serves many rural communities as the only source of water or the other reliable alternative. The picture on the left here is one of the rivers in Makueni, and this is concrete water tank. It's called a water sump. And a water sump is basically a concrete river, a concrete tank that is installed within sand in a dry riverbed. And it's installed with numerous pipes with perforations that allow the water to infiltrate through that gallery into the tank, and then this is pumped out for use by the local community. And so we have many of these tanks across Makueni rivers because the sand acts as an alluvial aquifer. And this sand, as I mentioned earlier, it's a very potential area for recharge. So during the storms, during the very intense rains that we're experiencing now, the erratic rains, we have a chance through these rivers to allow it to infiltrate into the rivers, recharging both the alluvial aquifer, which is the loose aquifer within the sand, but also infiltrating down into the groundwater storage aquifers. And most importantly, this water is very easily accessible to the local community through the scoop holes that I showed earlier, where you can just dig up and you can access water, or in a more sophisticated way, then you can access the water through this water sumps and using a pump, and that water can be pumped. And to mention that in Makueni, the capital town of Makueni County, the headquarters of Makueni County, gets a quarter of its water from a water sump like this one, where it's pumped into a water treatment plant and supplied to the residents of the capital town of Makueni. So this is a huge resource that requires management. However, like I mentioned, sand mining still becomes a very key competing claim over sand in these rivers, because to get the water, to maintain the water, then you have to maintain good deposits of sand, but yet there's also the demand for sand for construction, but that is a discussion for another day. But in these rivers, there's a technology, sand dams, which has proven to be a major facilitator for harvesting water, rainwater in these dry river beds. And this has been mainly achieved through community action, where the community comes together to do a sand dam. And the sand dam is, like what's on the first picture, is a concrete wall that is built across a dry riverbed, a seasonal river. And what it does, it impounds sand on the upstream, of course, together with water. And over time, it stores enough water that can be either pumped out through a water sump or through a shallow well, or in a very rudimentary way, then the community can access it through the shallow wells. And this is water that is used for domestic use, for irrigation, and that kind of economic activities within the community. And most of the community. Sorry.
For the sake of time, could we start wrapping up?
Sure.
So
yeah.
We have enough time. Thank you very much.
All right. Probably just to mention the sand dams, which is majorly done by communities. I want to mention that Makueni alone has over 700 sand dams, and 90% of this have been done by the community through their own organization. They come together, they contribute the locally available materials, they contribute the unskilled labor, and with support from the local agencies like development partners, then they put up this water harvesting structures. And this is just a sign that communities are able to organize themselves and chart their way forward. Finally, I would be very unfair to the women, to myself, to the very hardworking rural communities and women in particular, if I don't mention the gender lens in looking at water development and governance. Most of these projects that are happening in Makueni and the other counties are women-led, of course, because they bear the brunt of lack of water, poor governance, climate change, and so the involvement in governance would be a big opportunity that can be tapped into in terms of taking forward transformative water agenda and the general management of our water agenda. I think I will end there. This would have been important to mention, but as my parting shot is that as we look forward towards water governance, it's important to look at the role of community groups in self-organizing, and what will be the role of everybody else at the higher level, the governments, the development partners, in providing guidance, for creation of guidance with the community, but allowing the community to actually do the implementation of most of this work, because it is in their own best interest. They understand the local ecological context better than any of us. And this, I think, from where I sit, would push this agenda more sustainably. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Halinishi, and sorry to hurry up in the section, the open discussion. We can continue with the discussion about the water as a common good. I think we missed that part. Last but not least, right now, George Gitwanja. George is an agroecologist and GIS professional who collaborates with commercial farmers in the Upper Ati River Basin to transition from conventional, chemical-dependent agriculture to agroecology. Through his local community-based organization, Community Action for Nature Gitunguri, he conducts research and training on the widespread use of farm pesticides and their impact on human health and local water bodies, as well as the issue of over-abstraction of water for irrigation. George today will be presenting the initiatives of the Ati River Community Network aimed at reducing the negative effects that some activities can have on water quality and quantity. Thank you very much, George, for joining us today. And we encourage everybody to send your questions through the Q&A section or through the Zoom chat. George, the floor is yours. Thank you very much again.
Okay. Thank you, Sebastian, for the opportunity. And thank you all for tuning in. So I'll be taking you through a peculiar issue which is happening in the Upper Athi along a river called Roiro River. It's one of the rivers that's joined the Athi River. So my title I chose this title because it's imposed water scarcity. Actually, that area, we have plenty of water because we have so many rivers, but people cannot access the water in the dam. So I decided to call it imposed water scarcity in water-prone regions. So a case of exclusion from accessing water around Roiro Dam. So maybe we can just share a background. So as we all know, water is regarded as a critical resource that we all know. As the other presenters had said, Kenya is ranked as one of the water scarce country with less than 100 meter cubic per capita per year. So now narrowing down to the case study. So the case study is located in the Upper Athi. We are going to see the map. So the Athi River, of course, is a big catchment which occupies about 10% of the total land in Kenya and constitutes about 25% of Kenyan population. So it's quite a critical, watershed. So that is the research area. It's located in Kiambu County, one of the 47 counties in Kenya. As you can see from the map, we have so many rivers flowing through into the dam. These are all streams. So, and then the water leaves, I don't know why it's rushing. So basically that's the map of the research area. So maybe a little bit of historical background. So the dam was constructed in 1938, but hydrological surveys had started much earlier in 1909. This was to serve the white settlers in Nairobi after the arrival of the Uganda-Kenyan Railway. Then the dam proceeded, even though the community had resisted, the dam proceeded and it was built. So in 1945, there's documented tussle between the natives and the white settlers. Of course, the community was fearing losing their right to flooding. So in 1947, the engineers decided to adjust the dam to raise the wall. So in 1950, the dam was completed. And then that is where the issue of exclusion and discrimination started. So in 1959, I think the governor of Nairobi decided to install a gate buoy at the dam to prevent people from accessing. Of course, in 1960s, it is documented from the Kenyan archives that one Mr. Mwadhi had decided to take children for a picnic, but the city engineer refused, saying that they could only allow 12 people at a time or per day. So around 1963, just before independence, the dam was reserved for the white people to go and recreate, to do fishing, to do sports, water sports. And then, of course, over the years, there have been so many cases of intimidation. Long after Kenya gained independence, we have so many cases of intimidation. People are being assaulted. People are being beaten, trying to fetch water from the dam. And then in 2012, of course, the government is contemplating doing a second dam, which will be downstream of Ruiru Dam. And remember, we have not solved the issues of the Ruiru 1 dam, and they are thinking of constructing an even bigger dam downstream of the Ruiru 1 dam. So yeah, so maybe we can proceed to the key issues. So the village where the dam is located, the community is largely rural. So there are 7 villages. The natives depend on agriculture, of course, for livelihood. We did a survey where we interviewed 50 households, and 48 out of 50 actually depend on agriculture for livelihood and food. Most homes have no piped water. Just 10 out of 50 households that were interviewed had access to piped water, but the figure is declining. Why is it declining? The company that supplies water to the village is a community-led water provision. And as Alinisha had said, they are riddled with a lot of corruption and a lot of inefficiencies. People are actually leaving. So out of these 10 people, three people had already indicated to quit. They're not going to be part of it. So the number is actually lower. Today, this survey we did in 2021. So I think this number has gone down by now. Then most homes have shallow water wells. So shallow water wells are wells that are dug by men, usually about 100 feet. So 38 out of 50 households that were interviewed were relying on shallow water wells. Some homes had 2 wells. Why? Because the first well failed, they had to do another well. And this number, the 38, not all homes can afford to have this well. It's very expensive. One well can cost around maybe $1,200 to do. Not many homes can afford. So those people who don't have the shallow wells, where do they get their water from? They get their water from rivers and springs, or from Ruiru Dam, which they are being excluded from. They usually play some cat and mouse games with the police who guard the dam, and they're able to fetch. So there's no sewerage system in the area. So most people do pit latrines. So there's actually a risk of people actually contaminating their water sources, because most of in those villages, the wells and the toilets are usually very close to each other because people have small farms. So there's a risk of the toilet reaching into the aquifer. So that's a risk of even gastrointestinal infections that Harinisha had talked about, which can cost a lot of money to the country. So moving on, there are many compounding issues. The streams are becoming intermittent, of course, with the changing land use, with the changing rainfall pattern and the hydrological balances, the streams are drying. The water tables are falling. From the survey we did, initially, most wells had an average of 73 feet. Today, when we were doing the survey, the water table had fallen to 85 feet. and some are even lower. This is just an average figure. Some wells had gone up to 150 feet. Sorry, I think it's rushing. The cost of water harvesting in the village, we realized it's very expensive to buy a tank. It is costing around 25 shillings per liter. So if you want a tank of around 1,000 liters, you need to have at least 25,000 Kenyan shillings. Not many families can afford. Then the dam, the officials who manage the dam decided to do a buffer zone of 30 meters so that people cannot access the dam. So they have done a buffer zone of 30 meters. So if you cross this barrier and these guards catch you, they'll beat you with a whip. People are actually being whipped. Then the issue of climate change. Of course, when these rivers are drying, the dam is also drying. And then the management exerts more pressure by maybe increasing security to guard the little water that is remaining. So this is a feedback mechanism. Yeah, so maybe you can proceed. So of course, our study design was designed in a way that we had objectives. Our first objective was, of course, to document the alternative water sources by the household living around rural dam. We wanted to understand how the community is impacted by the inadequate water resources. We wanted to understand the governance. How are the guards treating people? How does the manager, what is his demeanor towards the people around the dam? Of course, the other issue was to establish whether community wish to gain access. Does the community, maybe we see it as a problem ourselves, but does the community want to gain access? We wanted to understand from the community themselves. We also wanted to facilitate the community to come up with what we call RUA, the Water Resource Users Association, to use it as a bargaining vehicle for them to gain access for the water in the dam. So maybe we'll proceed and see whether we achieved. So of course, we did a lot of surveys, we did key informant interviews, of course, a desktop research. That is how we were using a GPS to map the homes which we visited. That is how the homes are distributed around the dam. So the 50 households we visited, of course, there are many more households, but we just picked a sample given the budget we had and the time. So we discovered the livelihood sources, as we had said. Most of them are relying on agriculture. As you can see, we have people doing vegetables, maybe the picture on my left. Then we have tea farms, and then we have dairy. These are all water-intensive farming activities, but people have no access to water. Yes, livelihood sources. Yes, sorry. I think I mixed up my presentation. These are the water sources. So on the top left, we have the water wells. These are the streams flowing into the dam. We have the water harvesting facilities, as you can see, and then the dam itself where people access. These are the water sources in the area. Of course, as I indicated, the wells are failing. This is an example of a well that has been abandoned. So they had to do another well. This is just next to the dam. And you can see on the left, somebody had planted some capsicum waiting to make money, but because of wells that dried and he could not access the water from the dam, he just watched his whole crop failing. So the dam itself is also drying. So it's not easy. It's not even, proof to climate change. The dam is drying. And when the dam dries, the police are actually stopping people from withdrawing water from the rivers that flow into the dam. So from the interviews we held, they told us now the police are trying to do patrol on the rivers that flow into the dam to prevent people from abstracting water. So it's actually becoming very serious, which can lead to water conflict. Downstream of that rural river, around 15 kilometers, you can see it dry. So the people downstream, as we said, we are all connected. So the people in Nairobi have to get their water, but the people downstream of that water, where is actually, this is actually a dry area. It's called Juja Farm. And they do a lot of farming and they rely on this water for, potable use. The river is actually a dry bed. So maybe go back. I think I mixed up something. So out of all this, maybe the future, what is the future of this? Is it bright or gloom? Maybe as a matter of fact, after we did this survey, the matter has been raised to the National Forum. The area MP actually confronted the Nairobi governor at the Nairobi Water Management over the same issue. However, the MP has now fallen in favor with the current government and has no power now to, has no leverage to make things happen. However, in 2021, we organized a marathon, and we were able to fundraise to buy water harvesting equipment for the schools around the, the dam. So this is something we participated with Violet, but I think she never participated in the marathon, but we were in the organizing committee where we helped the MP to organize the marathon to raise the issue. But that was in last year, in 2022. However, currently the MP is now fighting the government, so she has there's no way she can, follow up with the issue. So I think that was supposed to be the end. That was supposed to be the end of my presentation. I wanted to keep it brief. So yeah, I'm done.
Thank you very much, George.
Unless somebody has a comment or a question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. And actually, we are moving to the open discussion section. Thank you very much, George, for your comprehensive presentation. And this shows, before we pass to the open discussion, all the presentations that George, Halinishi, Violet have presented show us that the Transformative Water Pact is more valid than ever, because many of the principles, many of the action plan that is included in the TWP can be included and can be used as an instrument to enhance water governance and to reduce inequalities for an equitable distribution of water. So having said that, we can move with the first question that we have received. And this is a question that is directed to Violet. It was on your last slide, so you can briefly tell us about what are your thoughts about this. And the question is, how can the Transformative Water Pact serve as a framework to address challenges related to water governance, and how might we leverage it to further the strategies and actions that have been undertaken? Violet, if you can turn on your camera and your mic.
Okay. Start video. Okay. So, yeah, when you look at the principles of the Transformative Water Pact, one of the principles it starts with is that water is essential for life. Yeah, and then also water has diverse values. Now, the problem has been that in the past, certain people have believed that if might is right, because the principle number 4 is that water is a right. And the reality is that there are some people who do not believe that water is a right. They believe if they can buy the biggest pump and be able to pump as much water to irrigate crops, maybe even flowers for export, they should be allowed to do that. The might is right argument. So the pact brings these principles in one place where you can start having these discussions. If water is a right, what does it mean when people in Nairobi sit under their shower for 30 minutes with water from Roiro Dam, which Roiro Dam supplies 4% of the water to the city of Nairobi, yet a woman sitting right next to the dam cannot access 20-liter jerry can of water for domestic use. So those kinds of conversations, you can hold them with the community. And as the Athi River Community Network, we even took people from the community in Nairobi, in the city, to go and meet the communities at the Roiro Dam, to hear that your mismanagement of water in the city, such that they don't harvest rainwater, they just let the rainwater run off as floods, but then they expect water is brought in by the government to supply them. They start now seeing the connection. People don't see the connection unless now we start bringing those connections, because communities have been moved. There's been a lot of upheaval within the last 100 years. So we need to start creating those connections. And that's what we do with the Athi River Community Network, so that people can start seeing your greed, your need for too much water is affecting me when I'm upstream. That's, yeah, in a nutshell, that's how we are using the pact. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Violet, for your answer and to keep it brief. The next question is directed to Halinishi, and it goes as follows. How do communities play a role as custodians for effective and equitable protection of water sources, especially in a context of unequal power relations and injustices where women, ethnic minorities, and subsistence farmers are primarily impacted?
Thank you very much. I think I'll borrow from my very last slide there that I didn't do justice to it. I wish I started with that. But it largely borrows from a framework in natural resource management that tries to link the people side, how we organize ourselves in terms of the rules, in terms of the policies, in terms of the local community, preferences, values, because these are the aspects that that inform governance regimes, and tying it to the resource base, which is now, in this case, we're talking about water. And so when you come back to the community side, the community has the best interest in itself to want to protect and to develop their own water resource, because they're the primary users. So they bear the brunt of not having water. They also acknowledge that they have the biggest responsibility in availing the water for themselves. They also, very importantly, have local knowledge from living with this resource, from interacting with it, so they understand the resource base a lot of times better than us, and that's why the citizen science aspect comes in. And all these things put together, their local knowledge, their own ability to self-organize, their own ability to set their own rules, their own ability to enforce the rules they set. When they agree, we're only abstracting water for domestic use, and we're not doing irrigation because we only have so much water left, then the community is able to enforce that. Then at the higher level, that is where formal policies, science, formal science, mainstream science comes in to complement what the community already has as their local knowledge, their self-organization, their impetus to move the water governance aspects as their own agenda. So this one at the higher level comes in just to reinforce that. But a lot of times, like Violet has mentioned, this knowledge that comes from outside comes with a lot of external interests, and that also comes with injustices. So my ideal situation would be work with the community strength, because they're able to organize, they have the knowledge, and they have the interest to better themselves, and then support them to move that agenda forward. So applying the socio-ecological framework, systems framework, then would help us in empowering the community, working with the community to then better manage the water resources, and also understand the water resource as a system, because we cannot manage what we don't understand. But the community already has that knowledge. For example, if I just pick a quick example from the sand-water relationship, the communities will tell you the places with coarse sand, the sand with big grains, stores better, cleaner water, and that's the places where they target the scoop holes that they dig, because the water will flow faster, the water will be cleaner for their own consumption. When you come to science, which I'm doing now, it will tell you sand with bigger pore spaces allows for more infiltration, and so it stores more water. So that really ties with what the local community already knows. But I come in with my science and think they do not understand these things. Whereas it would have been really easy just to build on what they already know, reinforce it, and allow them now to govern as the primary actors at that landscape level. So that is my submission.
Thank you very much, Halinishi. At the end, we have time to cover most of the topics. Thank you very much again. And the last question that we have received is directed to George. And it says, it's quite shocking to hear about the community exclusion from accessing the dam water. Is this kind of exclusion typical of other dams in Kenya, or is it specific of the Ruru one dam? Sorry.
Yes, yes, it's not typical to Kenyan dam. There's a dam in, there's a town called Eldoret, and there's a dam in Iten, where people are being systematically excluded from accessing that water. In South Africa, I also read there's a dam in Mpumalanga province, where communities are also being excluded. It's something like, it's something global, because for people in urban areas, they are treated like special, and the people in the villages, sometimes they are treated like people who don't exist. And government are usually more sensitive to the people in urban areas because of even issues to do with riots. If riots occur in the cities because of lack of food or water, then they are usually more, they can also bring about regime changes. So it is not typical. It is not unique. It is something that is happening globally. If I was to do serious literature review, even in South America, you still find, like in Chile, I have seen people being excluded from accessing water by those avocado farms. So it's not unique just to the Kenyan context. So it's something that is happening, I think, all over globally. But I think the voices are still not out there. So if people are to document, you'll be shocked by the magnitude of this problem. Yeah. I hope I've answered sufficiently.
Yeah, it is typical.
Thank you very much, George. Sorry, Violet?
No, sorry, I didn't think my mic was on, but I was just saying it's very typical. There are also other dams now in the Tana River. One is called the Kaine Dam, and the communities living around there have been protesting for years because they are denied access to the water, which is piped to the city. And also Sasumia Dam. There are several dams where communities are living next are excluded from accessing that water.
Thank you very much, George and Violet. And this is sad to bear in mind and to acknowledge. Inequalities are still an obstacle for communities and for people to fulfill and to enjoy the right to water. For the sake of time, we're going to move forward with the next section, which is the final remarks from Aida. These final remarks are going to be made by Jenny Rodriguez. She's lawyer from the Ecosystems program. She's from Colombia, and she's joining us from Bogota. Jenny, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Sebas. Well, I would like to share with you. Sorry, I have. Spanish. Yeah. No, I was in the translation channel, the wrong translation channel. I would like to share with you a couple of reflections regarding the session, just to end this journey we have started a couple of months ago. The first reflection, we find that in this series, we have seen cases and experiences of transformative water governance practices that have been implemented globally by quilombolas, indigenous people, community-based organizations, environmental movement, and civil society, and how they recognize water as an essential element that to sustain all life in Earth and all life systems. These experiences allow us to understand, firstly, why we need to keep insisting to our governments that water bodies and all ecosystems that surround them are strategic to the hydrological cycles, such as wetlands, mangroves, grasslands, peatlands, moor, glaciers, paramos, and all mountain ecosystems should be protected as a priority. These experiences allow us to understand also why we need to protect water, as it is the fundamental element that integrates the ancestrality of indigenous peoples, and why we need to protect and defend their traditional practices that maintain the natural balance and equilibrium of the ecosystems that they inhabit. As Halinishi put it recently, communities are the custodians of water as a common good. Second, we also saw how mining activities and other extractivist practices, such as dams, have affected the natural course of water, degraded the water catchment systems, and affected the quality and availability of water in the global south, causing droughts and major disasters that had affected millions of lives, breaking the traditions and ancestral practices of traditional communities, and in general threatening the water security of our regions. These shared experiences have shown us, as our colleague Teca de Serra de Gandarela pointed out in the first session, that we are integrated to nature, and from nature we take life. We are water and we cannot live without it. And this is well known by the wonderful women who accompanied us in the sessions, who have been at the front part of the struggles for water from their territories, from the academia, and who were not only the ones who inspired many of the principles of this pact, but who implemented every day in their local and international advocacy processes, litigation, and community work. And lastly, we identified that the Transformative Water Pact is indeed a tool, as Seba said earlier, that not only captures the main concerns around water risk and impacts in the global south, but serves as a roadmap for justice operators, legislators, governments, and other decision makers on how to move towards just and transformative water management. And this is the reason why we would like to invite you and encourage you to read the Transformative Water Pact on the official website launched for this series, and that you can appropriate it from your organization and share it widely with different actors involved in the definition of policies related to water governance. So thank you, Sebas, and thank you to the audience.
Thank you very much, Jenny. And great thanks to Violet, Halinishi, George for taking the time to prepare and to share with us their knowledge, their expertise, and their experiences protecting water. As Jenny was saying, all these presentations show us that the Transformative Water Pact is an instrument that is more useful than ever. And Jorge just sent the link of the Transformative Water Pact through the chat, so you can access. The instrument is in several languages, and there in the website you have all the information of the origin, the context, and the content of this instrument. Again, thank you very much to all the participants who joined us today. Thank you to both ends for trusting AIDA in this series of webinars. And thank you again, Violet, Halinishi, and George, for your knowledge. With this, we're going to close the event, this series of webinars, and we hope to stay in touch and to continue these discussions through the Transformative Water Pact content. Thank you very much. Before I forgot, the recording of this webinar is going to be sent to each of the participants as shortly. Violet, you raise your hand.
No, I think it was Halinishi. No, I didn't.
Halinishi.
No, it was by mistake, sorry. But thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much. We really
Thank you.
appreciate. Thank you.
Right. Bye.
Yeah, bye.